As Scott says, we now are in a battle for the soul of our nation. And we must be vigilant. And I want you to know that this running for office is not something any of our family would choose to do. Even becoming a senator, there's very few people that our family would walk across the street to meet. Movie stars and great men in office or anything, but those that hold these principles dear. And so this is a big sacrifice for us. They wanted me just to take a second. 20 years ago, we could see that in our schools, we had our kids in the public school, and they came home with questions like my one daughter, she was starting to, my teacher said Ben Franklin was a really bad man, or my teacher just can't stand George Washington, all this kind of stuff, or we were supposed to study the Constitution, our teacher made us skip that part, and so we didn't learn anything about that. And so we decided to pull our children out, and we started a homeschooling group, co-op group in our basement. We called it Camorra, and we had about 20 to 25 kids, 12 years up to 21, I think it was, years old. And we started every day, Scott, that the class was going, Scott would come take his lunch break and come home and teach us classes. Then we had other parents involved in this. And during this time, there was this memory program this girl had showed me from 1 to 10, how you can remember things with little pictures. And so I started working. I thought, I wonder if this would work. First I did the 10 Commandments. And after the 10 Commandments with these little pictures, I thought with these kids, let's try it with the amendments, the Bill of Rights and the amendments. Well, the Bill of Rights everyone had to memorize. And my son, when he was 8 years old, he had all the Bill of Rights memorized, parts of the Declaration. He knew all of the amendments to the Constitution, and he knew all of the Constitution through these little pictures, because after we had done the amendments, and in 30 minutes these kids knew all the amendments and never forgot them, we started taking it to the Constitution. And we would have debates and everything, and we'd meet up with other homeschooling groups, and it was just amazing. We'd go, what's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3? Commerce Clause. They'd all know exactly what it was, and so they wanted me to tell you that. I haven't got it written up yet, but I'm going to, and so that's a really fun way, but it kind of shows you how this thing that we're involved in now isn't something that just started a few months ago or a few years ago. It's been going on in our families' lives for years and years and years, and probably through the pre-existence, and it will go on when we're gone, I'm sure, into...
I recently had surgery on my foot, and so it seems like it's a long walk from there to here, but it's wonderful to be here. And if this is just a little neighborhood of those that care, I want to be in your neighborhood. It's wonderful to see those that care about these principles and are willing to gather together and perhaps take some time and share. What more appropriate time would it be than on the July commemorations that we do, to commemorate so many things that are absolutely critically important to every one of us today. You know, it's interesting, our family, well, I had family on the Mayflower. They weren't the Bradleys, but it was a line. And they came to this land to be able to do some things. They wanted to worship their God. They wanted to be able to practice their religion. They wanted to be able to have peace and freedom. And they wanted to be able to care for their wives and children. There aren't any more plains to cross. We are where we are, and it is what it is. And today is it. And it's astounding to me how the fundamental changes that have occurred in this nation have been ever accelerating. It has been so absolutely disheartening for me for my entire lifetime to watch great eternal truths of liberty slip through the fingers of those of us that have not been vigilant enough. We have watched as those that have held office have not been true to their oath. They have abandoned their oath of office to the United States Constitution. They have failed to uphold these great eternal principles, and because of that, we are faced today, as Tammy mentioned, with a very war for the soul of this nation. It didn't start just 18 months or so ago, as some would have us believe, and it's been going on for many, many decades. In fact, I gave a talk recently up in, well, it was in 2009 actually, so it's not so recent. It was about a year ago, to a group up in Wyoming. There was an old cowboy sitting on the front row. His boots looked like they were about as old as he was. And he's sitting on the front row because his hearing wasn't so good. And when I got done talking, he raised his hand and he said, I'd like to say something if I could. And so he stood up and he says, I'm the only one here that was born in freedom. He says, I was born in 1911. I'm 98 years old. He says, none of you understand what freedom is, because it has slipped through the fingers of this nation so dramatically in recent decades. And he's right. We have egregious enactments that occur every single day in this nation. You know, Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution says that all legislative authority herein granted was granted to the Congress, the House and the Senate. So all laws were to be created by the United States House and Senate. And there's a process of checks and balances they go through, obviously, to have the president sign off on it and everything. But there is no legislative authority for any other branch. And it's interesting to me that about a third of the laws that are created today are created legislatively, constitutionally. They may not all be constitutional. In fact, most of them are not. But those that are not created legislatively are absolutely, unequivocally unconstitutional. What happens is the executive branch, through executive order or through some kind of administrative law that's created in one of the departments of the executive branch, create law that's enforced upon the American people as though it had passed that constitutional process to be able to be law. About a third of our laws come that way. And they're enforced upon us as though we had put the people in office to be able to do that. Totally false. The other third of our laws come by judicial activism, through court decree. So we have a vast array of things that Americans would never have put up with as the founding of this nation occurred. So this fundamental change has not been recent. It's been going on, as I say, for many decades. It's interesting, back just before the November 2008 election, though, however, Barack Obama told the nation that they were on the very cusp of being able to fundamentally change this nation. And it is coming to pass at a very accelerated rate. It's interesting, here on June 28th, the United States Supreme Court put out the McDonald Supreme Court decision in regards to the Chicago Second Amendment ruling. And we could talk at length about that. I don't want to spend too much time talking. You might have some questions you might have too, but you need to understand that this fundamental change is written into the very decisions the Supreme Court is bringing down. And on just as recently as June 28th of this year, when the McDonald case came down on that Chicago Second Amendment ruling, they wrote in their syllabus, at the advance of their decision, a 214-page review. If you ever care to do that, go to the Supreme Court of the United States website, and you can read all 214 pages, the opinion as well as the dissent. But in that, they admitted the process by which the Bill of Rights was written, the purposes for which it was written, and the fundamental application of the Bill of Rights. And they admitted that there had been a fundamental change in the way those things were to occur in the legislation after the Civil War and since. They admit that. And so we as Americans, probably there's more truth to what that old cowboy had to say when he stood up, that old cowboy that was born in 1911.